Welcome to week 5, and this is a week where we've got a lot of extra material that I've added to the course for you. I've added 2 videos on crowd management, showcasing what can happen when things go wrong, from the Astroworld concert last year. On 2 different videos there, kind of showcasing what one's about 5 minutes and about 6 minutes long. The other one's probably closer to 3 minutes long. A couple of short little videos kind of outlining, you can see what happens when an event does not go off as planned, and that their emergency action plans were probably limited, if not almost non-existent, from the promoter standpoint, and as well as some new and exciting software that shows how to plan those events better for facilities through a company called OnePlan, and where they can plan out all sorts of different aspects of it and what the new and upcoming things are. There's a couple of videos there. One's a little longer. It's probably 40 minutes or so walking through that software, and then there's also the other one that's there is a little shorter, just kind of gives a quick overview on what they're about, what their company is about, and how they're working in the plan. So kind of showcases what is up and coming and how to manage the events. Okay, so this is all about crowd management this week. So the crowd manager, when you're an event manager, you have the responsibility, and if not, you also have the negligence aspect or the liability of it if you don't have a duty of care to the invitees. Okay, so what they're expecting when they come is a safe and an enjoyable environment. Your job is to identify risks of potential foreseeable risks, and make sure everybody's trained to do that, and whether that's in-house or outsourcing for that type of an event. And I'll give you the Astroworld one as an example of that. So those it should have been foreseeable given his track record, that the promoter and the facility should have definitely foreseen the potential for this, because he has been known to do this before. Not that he necessarily encouraged the crowd or anything. And again, liability between Live Nation, the promoter, the artist, and the facility is yet to be sorted out. But there was 8 deaths in that crowd, as well as I think another 30 or 40 injured. So it's where you have to really take the aspects of how you manage the security of an event very, very seriously. And not that they didn't have a lot of people on staff, but it looked like they weren't handling the crowd appropriately. And time will tell, as well as the litigation will, as to whether or not they identified those risks and whether they were foreseeable or not. Okay. So crowd management, you have these issues both in the U.S. and globally of terrorism. Lots of incidences have been drawn to the attention of the instance outside of the concert where people were shot, and there they appropriately acted, where they actually locked people in, and were able to drive the person away to where there was less damage and less because they could not actually get into the facility. The concert, I believe, was a soccer game in England. There was also a case of the concert in England where there was a shooter. Okay, these are all acts of terrorism. I mean, you could even go into in many European countries when you're looking at even non events like this, where the market bombings and other types of things. So terrorism is both a concern, both globally and in the U.S. Typically, global concerns typically are structural issues and overcrowding. Soccer games can get really, really crowded because of the way they sell tickets. Other fan violence there, basically, soccer games can get out of hand, and there have been cases where they have. And the Taylor report basically is an report that outlines all the risks that are associated with these types of events from Europe. In the U.S., we've got terrorism concerns as well. Okay, we also have fan violence. Okay, and trespassing. There's everything from running on the field to actually to where you have fights erupting in the stands, people who are intoxicated, obviously very much like Europe, but usually here it's not as much as a crowd issue as much as a fan to fan or several fans in essence. And then there's obviously the issues at college of running on the field. There's also player violence, and we've seen this in the NFL where players have been hit by have hit fans or and those types of things. So we have to be a little bit more concerned about that and how they're managed. Players are managed there. There have been cases where players have been not only fined by leagues, but also they've actually been arrested for assault. And then obviously compression waves and crushes, which is similar to the Astroworld issue. And again, that's definitely not an adequate managing of the crowd. Again, like we talked about last week, we have to check this aspect of foreseeability, which is that ability to anticipate that there's going to be an issue. And you really have to manage that. Okay. You've got to manage and anticipate, not react. As it looks like they did in Astroworld, they did not anticipate that type of crowd and that type of reaction, and they should have from start to finish. As a person who works in the industry, that should have been something that should have been handled at the contract level, as we talked about last week. And granted, it's not that they didn't, but they had a crowd of 50,000 people and probably only a managed crowd capacity of a number of officers. I can't remember the exact number, but obviously there was still not enough to control that crowd. And be able to render aid in that type of situation. This is probably the most volatile type of situation you can have because it is outside. And you have to do a lot to manage a crowd that's outside. Whereas inside, there's seating in most parts in the crowd in the floor aspect of it, where there would be the pit, as you quote unquote call it. The pit is not as large an area as it would be outside, and that's where I think they went wrong, is not managing that aspect of the pit a little bit better. And security personnel will obviously be evaluating that particular event for years to come. What is reasonable and prudent by a professional in implementing a plan to less likely that things are going to happen. So you want to minimize that risk again, like we talked about last week. You've got to continually evaluate and revise those operating procedures. Okay, these are and we look at this from all areas, from credentialing to parking. Credentialing is allowing people to be in certain areas at certain times, who needs that access and how you can restrict that. Parking, transportation to and from the parking areas, staffing, the entire security issue. Now lately, more in the last, although it's always been there, but post 9/11, especially now, things like NFL has probably one of the strictest policy on banned items. Not that everything gets stopped, but they definitely will make sure that they are searching. Typically can be everything from, I know when I've walked through, I've been patted down, I've been wanded, I've walked through magnetometers, which are those magnetic things that you see. Everything short of the TSA aspect of that, where when you get on a plane, that type of body scanner. And you're balancing that right against the privacy rights and consent and the necessity, okay, which means if it's necessary to do that and you think there's an immediate threat, then that privacy rights can be trumped. And conducting effective searches is one of those where you want to minimize not only weapons, but you also want to assess things like extra alcohol and managing those types of things, as we will get into when we talk about the food and beverage aspect. Yeah, and this is why you subcontract out a lot of the security issues. And typically in a crowd management plan, you've got levels of security and layers of security. So you have everybody from uniformed officers and law enforcement to private security, private armed security, to private unarmed security, to companies that manage crowd control, ushers, and those and the like. So you have layers of aspects of security personnel at most events. The number of that depends on the event. Okay. But the key components of this is you've got to have a trained, qualified, knowledgeable staff. Excuse me. You've got to be able to implement that emergency plan when something happens, know exactly, and needs to have somebody who is in charge and who can make those decisions quickly. You establish ejection criteria and how you handle that. You establish a command center. Every event I've worked has had a command center. And typically when you have issues, you notify them, and then they would immediately assess the appropriate response. Also making sure that you're using signage and informational, directional, variable messages, message boards. One of the issues that is in the Astroworld example is the fact that they didn't use the signage, video boards or anything along those lines to convey messages and to help control the crowd, and making sure that to talk about safety procedures. And I'm sure that's going to come up in the post-evaluation as they work through litigation. Okay, we've got emergent. These are things that are happening right now. Right now you've got you've got the aspect of drones now, where both that are being used by law enforcement, but also by other individuals. Drones possess a threat into the security of those types of things, because if they can carry packages, they can carry a bomb. So that becomes an issue that even was not there when I was involved in the aspect. Closed circuit TV, CCTV, in other words, security cameras. There are security cameras everywhere now in stadiums, both working during the event and after the event. The command center houses usually most of the feeds for the event. And they will monitor that for crowd issues. They'll be sweeping and panning the crowd for crowd issues. And they're using that again for assessment, and also for an immediate response. It's part of the emergency action plan. You're looking at the national special event classification. So, the Super Bowl, the World Series, those are national special events that require extra security. And they have typically those are they can be federally managed. Both of the ones I worked at were both federally managed. So we're under the federal government's classification, and the Secret Service was responsible for the ones I worked at, which is the first Super Bowl after 9/11, and the immediate year after that. So The Super Bowl one was definitely everybody reported to the Secret Service. Um, Vapor wake dogs. Okay. So these are dogs that are detected to sniff out issues in the crowd. And they're looking for vapors. Okay. Chemical vapors, biological weapons. They're using dogs to assess those types of things. And then the Federal Safety Act, which came into play after 9/11. And as in more recent years, as acts of terrorism and active shooters are have become more prevalent, and that's an act that dictates how you can manage and how you have to manage facilities from the perspective of an active shooter or terrorism. If we take a look at emergency action plans, which is the plan that you put into place when you're looking at this aspect of crowd control, and what happens if something goes wrong. An emergency is an unexpected event, okay, that puts something in either property or life in danger, and requires immediate response. Okay, that can be everything from a slip and fall to a fight breaking out to lightning in the stadium, or lightning outside at an event, weather events, and all these types of things fall into this aspect of an emergency. So it's an unexpected event. Okay. And then what you do is emergency management planning is basically you're planning for all of these. And you end up turning into a very sizable book when you take a look at some of these emergency management plans, because basically it's okay, it's a playbook. It's just like you were the quarterback of a pro football team, and basically you size up the defense on the other side, and you're assessing and implementing that plan according to what you see on the defense. Same thing for emergency management plan pre-planning. You're anticipating the probable issues. You're looking at the coordination response, what needs to happen. Then you're going to, in the pre-planning stage, you're going to create that emergency action plan, and then make sure everybody is trained, and then continuing to evolve as those issues happen. So the emergency action plans that I've been familiar with basically cover everything from what happens if somebody slips and falls, to theft, to all the way up to and including an active shooter or a bomb threat. You can't, basically the first thing you have to actually do is plan for the worst, and you can't completely eliminate the possibility of something happening. It's going to happen. You just have to create a culture of knowledge and preparedness. So when things do happen, they react. You actually react. You overcome the fear or freezing. You want to be able to react to those types of things. So, and you want to be able to create that culture where employees just quickly respond to it without even thinking. Okay. And the first thing you want to make sure that you're doing is calm. You're proactive, you're positive, your outlook is going to be, things are going to be all right. And you provide the direction and let the staff execute that as they've been trained. That's an adequate emergency action plan. Okay. Basically, you look at how the types of emergencies play into this from the pre-planning, everything from a local emergency to major emergencies to catastrophic emergencies. Catastrophic emergencies are things like that almost never happen, but could happen. Active shooter, bombs, a fire breaks out. Those are all could be catastrophic emergencies. Or they could be just a major emergency. A fire breaks out in one area of the stadium. How do you manage that emergency? That's a major emergency. Local emergencies are small, isolated incidents, usually localized to one area of your facility that can be easily managed. Major emergencies require a little bit more of a response, a little bit more of a coordinated response between different players. And then the catastrophic ones, as the one turns out is the one in Astroworld, that turned out to be definitely a major event, and actually turned out to be catastrophic because there was loss of life. Catastrophic usually means either loss of life or a loss of property, significant loss of property. So those actually turn out to be the point where they're classified in almost in the catastrophic stage. And you want to avoid those if you can at all costs. Some things you can't, because obviously you can't control other people's actions. So when we take a look at pre-planning here, as we talked about here, is all being applied to all aspects of the operation. It needs to go through every employee, whether it's temporary staff, part-time staff, contracted staff. Everybody needs to know their role and how to act. In basically you form an emergency management planning team. I've been on one or two of those. And typically you're looking at there on how you formulate plans based on the areas that are of need. And again, mission align over here, you're actually putting that into the actual plan into development. You're looking at established guidelines of all the agencies involved, all the departments involved internally, okay, and looking at the goals. And like I said, it's a playbook. And it's a big playbook. They open it up and they turn the page to whatever section of that emergency is, and they immediately know how to act. Everybody, players know how to act. That would be the employees and subcontractors, contractors, everybody, and they act in a coordinated manner. Okay. This needs to be, it has to be an integral part of an ongoing aspect. It needs to be part of the DNA of the facility. So you are ready to go when it happens, no matter what happens. And that's why you train. Most facilities do train on these types of issues. These are some responses. These are medical emergencies. Typically, within typically you're looking at everything from a base medical station typically is where they're assessed at. There are usually typically first aid stations that are located throughout facilities, okay, that you can go to for, okay. Typically they're usually in stadiums. A lot of times they're just carts, but they're usually a cart part in each section, to where there is or there might be a one on each level, or each side, where you can go for basic first aid, everything from heat stroke to intoxication. There is usually a base medical station, which is typically closer to where you take more serious people. They get them down and out of the crowd, away from everything, and can assess a little bit better, which means they may end up moving out through an ambulance outside, to more serious medical attention. And that's exclusive of the ones that are typically the ones that are standby for the field, which are also managed by usually typically the the teams themselves. There's people walking around with medical up and down the stands typically, and there is at least 1 to 2 or 3 ambulances hanging around to ensure that they can immediately prompt and treat anybody. Because again, medical emergencies can be everything from a heart attack all the way to somebody falling down a ramp, to typically they're more minor, typically things like heat stroke, too much beer, they're intoxicated, or it's heat based these days. Those are the common things that usually are picked up with, but they can be more serious than that, and that's where you want to make sure that you're handling that correctly. And we're going to finish up with AEDs that are located typically most of the time throughout the facilities now, which are defibrillators. Typically they are, anybody can use them. They're set up so they actually walk you through them. So what you do is, typically most of the time, And most security personnel, as well as any other personnel, should know the location of an AED. And they're usually located at strategic points throughout the facility, so you can go grab them really quickly. And you actually have to maintain them, but you basically, under the Good Samaritan statutes, you can't do no harm. So making sure that you understand that aspect of it. So ensure that you're and typically those, like I said, are there, and they're there to prevent serious heart issues, because basically in 4 to 6 minutes you're dead. Okay, if you're not dead, then you're probably, the likelihood of a full recovery is smaller than that. So if you can immediately administer that to somebody who is suffering a heart attack, the chance of them likely surviving that is really great. So you want to make sure, typically in facilities and outside facilities, you want to make sure that those are available, and it's part of your risk management plan, as well as your emergency action plan. All right, I hope you do check out those videos that I posted. There's some really interesting information there about those types of facilities and events. And I'll see you next week.